Jai Om Vishnuvad Puruman Sutri Braj Charja Stotra Shri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Raj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Nama Charja Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Gangamai Ki Jai Pramanamai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Remind me to tell you later, show you later how these work. There's a trick. Thank you all for coming to tonight's Istagosthi, where basically anything goes. Any question or topic that you might like to ask about. Om Jnana Timirantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jaina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Koda Mahyam Dadhati Shapatamtikam Mande Hang Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrasatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namustute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanam Sute Devi Pranamami Holi Priya Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyevacha Padita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Ram. Welcome again. There's a question from Sankarshan Prabhu. Sometime before the pandemic hit, there was a plan for a group of devotees designated as Sabha to review revisions in Prabhupada's books, primarily the Bhagavad Gita, and reverse any they deemed as unnecessary. Have any developments occurred with that which you are aware of? First, they're not designated as Sabha, they're a BBT review board. The review board has been appointed, and I think they're reviewing Bhagavad Gita as it is. I'm not really in touch with the process, so I don't know much more about it than that. Well, I know some of the members. I believe Kalachandji Prabhu is a member. Keshav Bharati Maharaj is a member. Radhika Ramana Prabhu, I think, is a member. And I'm not sure who else. I'm not really in touch with it. I can't tell you too much more. If you have something specific you want to ask, you can say. Okay, and Atina Prabhu has some questions.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranams. So I missed your class, this Istagosthi, last couple of times, so I missed it very much.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Maybe that's me. Maybe you slow down and speak louder.
Yes, I apologize. I just missed your Istagosthi the last few times, so I'm very glad to be back. I had a couple of questions, and this has come up because I'm following Bhakti Samashima Bhagavatam class, and I was just curious if Yamaraj's abode is not hell, but actually Yamaraj's abode,
yes, is
not hell, but actually a clearinghouse, then doesn't that mean that every person or soul who didn't make it back to Godhead, meaning the Vishnu Dutas have taken them back, then are thus taken by the Yamadutas?
No.
But that also doesn't make sense to me.
No, hold on. We'll stop there. It's made clear in the 6th canto that not every conditioned soul is brought before Yamaraj, but those who perform impious activities, they're brought before Yamaraj, which of course is quite a good number, but not everyone.
Thank you. So
and that's not human beings, of course, the lower creatures all automatically act according to their prescribed duties, so they don't appear before Yamaraj either.
Thank you. So to clarify, that means if a human being who has free will and doesn't act purely on instincts and duty has more impious activities than pious, then they are taken by the Yamadutas for judgment to Yamaraj's abode.
That's what I understand from Prabhupada's writing.
If it's more impious.
Oh, what? I didn't hear that last part by another devotee.
Yeah, that's my understanding from what Srila Prabhupada's written.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies a lot, because originally, yes, my understanding is that when the Vishnu Dutas come, that means you've made it back. You've made it back to Godhead.
The Vishnu Dutas come for you. You're on your way back to Godhead.
Thank you. And then originally I thought you go to Yamaraj's abode if you are going to hell, but yes, you confirm that if you've done more sinful and impious activities than good, then you're taken to Yamaraj's abode. But for everyone in between, how does the soul transmigrate, or are there any living entities that take the soul with the subtle body to the next destination? Or is it just a natural process that karma works itself out and there's a holding period, and when the next body that fits your karma, the soul travels, and there is no Vishnu Dutas and Yamadutas?
I don't know the technicalities of how it works, whether because everything works under the control of demigods, nothing just automatically happens. But I'm not privy to the mechanics of it.
Thank you so much. I had some more technical, but I don't think it quite matters. If you care to see, if you perhaps know, I'm merging this also because my conversations with Moose and what the Islamic faith talks about of judgment in one sense day. Well, to them it's God judging, and I guess for I'm gonna say for us, sorry, for them they say only God can judge, but in one sense, I don't want to say we take it a little more detailed and say, well, Yamaraj judges.
God ultimately does everything, but he doesn't have to do it all personally.
Right, thank you. He empowers or has Yamaraj, who's a pure devotee, do this duty. But when you go before Yamaraj for judgment, do you go in the material body you just had? Because the soul is Anu, or you have received your swerve yet.
The body you just had, because that body's been had. It's over. It's been reduced to ashes or what have you. But the soul is put into a particular kind of subtle body
Although, of course, he has a subtle body, but that's covered by another special subtle body. That's explained in the third canto, where we hear about adverse fruitive activities. There's a chapter on adverse fruitive activities, and there, the progress of the soul down to the lower regions before Yamaraj and hellish punishment, all of that is vividly described. And it's said he's put in a subtle body and dragged down. A special purpose-made subtle body.
So I'm going to tie this. So at any point in time, and I heard this, that the soul needs some sort of body. And so even at time of death, when you're right, the material body is reduced to ashes, somehow the soul with the subtle body, the mind, intelligence, ego, is put into another subtle body, which is put in front of Yamaraj for judgment. And then thus after that, sent to whatever destination and gets a new, I guess, subtle or material body for the next destination.
Another gross body.
Unless you're a ghost, though.
Gross body. Unless you're a ghost, yes, the ghost doesn't get another gross body. He just keeps a subtle body, and that's all.
Right. So, but it needs some sort of body. So then the question is, in the Brahma Jyoti, where the soul is there, it has to have some sort of body to exist in the Brahma Jyoti.
No, he doesn't. It's not that the soul needs a body. In the material world, the material bodies are imposed upon me. It's not that I need a gross body or that I need a subtle body. We need it, as my mom used to say, like a hole in the head. But it's imposed upon us. We're stuck with a subtle body and gross body. What is that? Prakritistani karshati, with which we struggle. So, and in the spiritual world, of course, we get a spiritual body, which is just suitable for serving Krishna, and which is Satchidananda. So it's full of bliss. It's a different story altogether. In the Brahma Jyoti, they have neither a gross body, they don't have a gross body, and the subtle body, as it were, is held in abeyance. The sense of self is held in abeyance. Everything is checked. So there's no subtle body to act. The subtle body is made of matter, and he's now in a position where there is no matter. He's in the spiritual world, but not in the personal sector. But some sense of what would you say? Some false ego is there because he's not accepting his eternal identity as servant of Krishna.
So I'm sorry, I'm to check. Well, first, the false egos can't exist though, because that's part of the.
What can't exist?
The false ego can't exist in the Brahma Jyoti though.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that. Yeah, it's material. It doesn't quite. You'd say the false ego doesn't exist or doesn't manifest itself. But the real ego is also not manifesting itself. His real ego is Nitya Krishna Das, servant of Krishna, eternally. But that ego is real ego is not manifest. So some stubbornness is there, something other than one's real self is there. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur uses the phrase that his individuality is held in abeyance. In other words, he's in a diseased condition. So what is that diseased condition? Well, that will be very hard to understand, because even the false ego itself is so subtle. So he's in the spiritual world, and yet he's not in his constitutional position. So it's a diseased condition, but it's a very subtle disease condition. I see a yellow hand next to Tulsi Priya.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, about 3 questions came up in my mind stemming from Athena's questions, and I can't remember all of them, but I kind of wrote something down about Actually, probably better if you go to somebody else, because I was writing one question down and then the other one.
Okay. Athena, did I answer your question adequately? Are you?
Thank you, Maraj. Well, I always have continued questions from there, but it's interesting that you say that they are in a disease condition because they're not dust, they're not in service to Krishna. But technically, the Shanta Ras too is not really service. That's why we say as Gaudiya Vaishnavas that service starts at Dasya. But so could Shanta also be seen as that quote unquote diseased state as well
No.
as the Jyoti?
Shanta is not seen by our acharyas as a disease state. It's just seen as a, what's the word, passive state. In the Brahmajyoti, the souls are unwilling to give pleasure to Krishna. Those in Shantaras are willing, but they're not active. They don't do anything about it. But they're favorable to the service of the Lord.
Can Shanta be considered some more as appreciation rather than devotional service?
Sometimes it's depicted that way, yes. Appreciation or a passive position, but not antagonistic.
Thank you.
Shanta Ras one is not obliged to fall down from the Brahmajyoti. Sooner or later one does.
Thank you, Maraj. And but if I may, as another tangential, it's very interesting that back in the Vedic culture, a lot of rites were done for the forefathers, and it was seen as this was necessary to, I guess, send them to heaven or just to.
Ghostly life.
Yes, exactly. So the rites done by the living family members for the forefathers, I remember Kripamoya Prabhu said, well, how is that possible? You know, what do they take from the rites? And they drink up the prana. But I always found that, I found it interesting because in one sense, you assume to have taken human birth, have lived millions of lives and even perhaps, and then to become devotees, millions of human births. So we have all been forefathers, many forefathers, millions of times back. So when those living entities are doing the rites, is our souls drinking up the prana and some sort of
I
something's
don't
happening?
know, this business about prana, the way Srila Prabhupada presents the matter is that they get Vishnu Prasad, because in the Shraddha ceremony and the ceremonies performed for the forefathers, there are offerings to Vishnu, and then the prasadam is offered to the forefathers.
So our soul, again, it sounds like existing in a different realm, will be accepting Vishnu Prasad. So the soul, again, without being, I guess, in a fully liberated state, could do and does exist in multiple realms. And one realm is accepting this Vishnu Prasadam.
I don't know about multiple realms, but wherever he is, he gets the Vishnu Prasadam by the arrangement of the sacrifice.
Okay, I guess it's saying, for example, you and I, everyone here, from a conscious perspective, living in this material growth body, right?
We're forefathers of somebody. Yeah.
Yes.
I admit to not understanding the complexities of all these things. Yes.
Comment?
Yes, Tulsi Priya.
It would seem to me that whoever I was the forefather of 10 generations ago, they stopped making offerings for me long ago. And so I don't, whatever prana I might have been getting or whatever is finished. I just was wondering, you know, at some point, it seems like these rituals are also for the benefit of the people who are the survivors. You know, you do something as a duty to your forefathers, but their karma is their karma, and what you're doing is you're maintaining that link, and it seems to me to be a very mode of goodness activity to be doing. But after that person dies, then who's going to be making offerings anymore? You don't go into an Indian's home and see them making offerings for the great, 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 great grandfather. It's usually just the father and the grandfather at the most, at least as far as I've seen. So I think at some point your own karma takes over and whatever your relatives are doing for you is finished.
Well, again, I admit to not understanding the complexities of these things. In Shastra, it's not presented that these ceremonies are only for the benefit of the living. Shastra does say that the ancestors benefit from what we do.
Yeah, I didn't mean to apply only the living, but just that seems to be that.
But I completely confess to not understanding the complexities of all these things.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. And I wonder what other thoughts might be floating around, what topics you might have in mind. Praveen has heard that Shraddha is for the previous 3 to 4 fathers. Unless somebody really has some inside information, I think we can leave it aside. The main thing is that, I won't even say what the main thing is. Now, Tulsi Priya, do you think it necessary or desirable for the spiritual aspirant to have studied or at least read the entire Srimad Bhagavatam before getting initiated? If not, why not? Sometimes it seems to me like it's easier to get initiated than to get a baccalaureate degree. Knowing what I know now, if I were a guru, I don't think I'd initiate me in the state I was then. Well, is it necessary to have read Srimad Bhagavatam first? And if not, why not? Well, it's not, because I didn't, and Prabhupada initiated me anyway, and he knew what he was doing. So on those grounds, that probably had a lot of other people he initiated who hadn't read the complete Srimad Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada used to quote that, or used to say that initiate means to begin. So at the time of initiation, it's understood that one may not be an accomplished student in the science of Bhagavad Dharma, but one is at least an acceptable candidate, particularly for the first initiation. Prabhupada said we can be liberal, and he was exceedingly liberal. He accepted all sorts of people on their willingness to chant Hare Krishna, on their willingness to serve, on their willingness to come under his guidance and direction. So and he didn't make it a requirement that you must have read or studied the full Srimad Bhagavatam. I don't think we find that as a requirement anywhere in our literature. But it's the beginning of Vedic study. In the old days, your initiation would be your initiation into study of the Vedas. And by definition, you weren't even fit to start until you were initiated. It's not that first you read all the Vedas and then you got initiated. The initiation was initiation into Vedic study. So we're not studying the 4 Vedas, we're studying Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. But the initiation almost implies that we haven't yet really gone that far. We may have read, we may not have read, but we're willing candidates. We've come, Shishasteham Shadimantam, we've surrendered, we've placed ourselves under the guidance of the Guru. And now we're willing to study and he's willing to teach us. That's what we hear. Now, let's see what's in the chat box. There's some chat, there's some comments. Up a little bit. Praveen says 4 regular principles and 16 rounds minimum, yes. And Tina says many devotees aren't intellects. So it wouldn't be a fair requirement either. Yeah, that's also, I was thinking of that they may not be great scholars, but on their service attitude, on their submissiveness, their willingness to come under the Guru's direction. The hunter who was initiated by Narad Muni hadn't read Srimad Bhagavatam, but he surrendered. Yes, I'll throw away my bow and I'll do what you tell me. I guess I asked because even some initiated devotees have issues with the Bhagavatam after getting initiated, so better they know what they're getting into. Well, devotees may have issues with so many things, even after being initiated, because what is that? Pramati Balavadridham. What is the beginning? Mana Krishna.
Chanchala.
Chanchala Mana Krishna Pramati Balavadridham. The mind is quite a piece of work. So sometimes even after being initiated, devotees have misgivings or questions or doubts. But if they're sincere and they're surrendered, and if the spiritual master properly guides them, then they'll come out all right. That they've read Srimad Bhagavatam beforehand is not a guarantee. We have all these courses now. The GBC puts you through a course so that you know what you're getting into. And yet devotees who've taken the course still have problems or have doubts or say, wait a second, this isn't, I'm a good Catholic boy, what am I doing here? So it's not a guarantee. But that sincere willingness to place oneself under the spiritual master's guidance. What is that? Yasyadeve parabhaktirita deve tata guru. Then, if one has faith in Krishna, faith in the spiritual master, tasyaite patita yarta prakashante, everything will be disclosed to him. All right, Tina has a yellow hand.
Thank you, Maharaj. Since we're on the topic of initiation, also this ties into Bhakti Center Srimad Bhagavatam class about Mother Ganges coming down to help Bhagirath, yes, forefathers to go to heaven since they were burnt to ashes. But first, many questions, but in the purports, Mother Ganges had her reservations about coming down to earth. One of them is that the sinful people will bathe in her waters and she would have to carry all these sinful reactions. And Srila Prabhupada's purport talks about how it's only Krishna who can actually, rid or take all of these sinful reactions. But for example, in initiation, the spiritual master, who is you can say a representative of Krishna, will also take the karma of the disciples and might get sick, for example, but Krishna, through his mercy, will negate all of these. A few questions. One, does the spirit in Srila Prabhupada's purport talks about how once the disciples initiated, then it's very important not to do any more sinful activities after initiation because the spiritual master will always take it. But is that true that the spiritual master will always take all the karma of the devotee until death at the very end of death of this material body? And two, I also found it was interesting that Mother Ganges was saying that because isn't she a pure devotee as well? So she should be able to, Krishna's grace would negate all of those simple reactions.
Even a pure devotee doesn't think, I'm a pure devotee, nothing will touch me. There's a story that I've heard really from a reliable source a long time ago, that Prabhupada was in Los Angeles, and which had recently become the world headquarters, and things were really sort of growing. And someone had made Srila Prabhupada a gold lame bead bag, and Jayashree had made Srila Prabhupada that coat that you see in some of the pictures with the peacock feather tassels. And Srila Prabhupada was sitting on his bed. He said, now we are getting so many things. So I'm just praying to Krishna that I may not fall down. So it's not that the pure devotee thinks I'm infallible, nothing can touch me. I'm in the clear. Even a pure and perfect devotee, or maybe especially a perfect and pure devotee, thinks that I'm always in danger. I may fall down at any moment. So I have to take shelter of Krishna.
And if you could address the karma aspect, and that also means the spiritual must get.
Right. Well, my general understanding, first of all, Prabhupada wanted us to take it seriously. He said the spiritual master may have to suffer for your karma. The idea is that the devotee shouldn't perform sinful activities. What is it? Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam. One should perform pious or spiritual activities, not sinful activities. Therefore, we say, we make the disciple promise, no gambling, no eating, no illicit sex, no intoxicants. Srila Prabhupada said these are the pillars of sinful life. So if the pillars are pulled down, the whole building falls down. So that's the end of sinful life, following these 4 regulative principles strictly. Then the question doesn't arise, does the spiritual master have to suffer for them, and so on. So the disciple should take it seriously. That said, my understanding also is that the spiritual master doesn't shoulder these burdens alone, but he is acting as Krishna's representative. Just as the spiritual master doesn't deliver the disciple alone, it's with the power of Krishna and the disciplic succession. So he's acting as an agent. You Prabhupada gave the example of the Viceroy who acts on behalf of the crown. So whatever is given to the Viceroy goes to the crown, and whatever authority comes from the crown goes to the Viceroy. So Krishna acts through the spiritual master. And the spiritual master is indemnified. If you become an officer of a corporation, you get indemnified. That is, if they sue the corporation will pay for your expenses. Not that you have to personally bear them, because you're not acting independently. Whatever you're doing for the corporation. So you're looking out for the corporation looks out for you. So you're acting on behalf of Krishna, and Krishna's also acting for your protection.
Thank you. So to confirm, when Prabhupada said that, it was more so of a warning, and just in general, initiated devotees should not engage in any more sinful activities. But 2, it does sound like, I guess because there is a connection then forever until the end of this material body, and maybe even in the future, next lives, there's shared karma between the disciple and the spiritual master, good or bad. But no matter what, it's not shouldered by just the spiritual master. Krishna also has a hand.
Yeah. I don't want to trivialize Prabhupada's statement that the spiritual master has to suffer for the activities of the disciple, because he said it, and he said it with some purpose. Sometimes he said the spiritual master sees bad dreams or so on on account of the activities of the disciple. So, although I don't fully understand it, I wouldn't want to just explain it away.
Thank you. And then if I could just ask a less technical question, is Mother Ganges actually the causal ocean, aka the Virat River as well?
The drops have come from the causal ocean into the material world when Vamadev kicks a hole in the shallow universe. Yes.
Sorry, you were breaking up just a little bit. So what I heard is, yes, the actual water that comes down from Earth is the causal ocean, aka the Virat River. But then Mother Ganges also, the personality is a deva, but the actual water is from the causal ocean.
That's what we hear. Yes.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
keeping Kamalini waiting. And I don't want him to have to wait any longer, so.
Also, Venkatesh Prabhu has a question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Want to take that first?
Well,
No.
right, let's see. Could you share some real instances that simple devotees were able to serve nicely by the grace of Sri Guru? Well, I gave the example of the hunter who was serving Tulsi Devi and chanting Hare Krishna. And he was a very simple person. I've heard of one story of a drug addict in Prabhupada times, known as Crazy Peter,
Get me the book.
went on to become a great scholar known as Kushakrata Prabhu.
It's on the bottom.
Could you please verify? I don't know that he was a drug addict, but he, of course, was part of the 60s generation. You weren't qualified to be part of that generation unless you were taking some sort of a drug, broadly speaking. And yes, he was, as we say, out of it. As I remember, he was close to catatonic, as I recall. He was really not very responsive to what was going on, what people were saying to him, what was going on around him. And yes, he became a brilliant scholar, a translator, a poet, and a brilliantly qualified person. So yes, that's true. Just see the power of the holy name. And Kamalini.
Before I ask my question, well, you could say that about so many, right? So many devotees. I mean, all of us were simple devotees. And especially, I'm reading I'll Build You a Temple by Jayadvaita Swami. And he was a simple devotee. You're reading it too. It's incredible. But here's this young boy, like 21 years old. And, Prabhupada has this desire to build a temple in Bombay, a grand temple. And they just found this land that was just jungle. And then Giriraj is sitting in front of him, Brahmachari, and Prabhupada said, and you could take charge of it. And he's like, all right, I heard that by pleasing the spiritual master, one can make advancement, but he had no experience in management, no inclination whatsoever. So these there's so many early biographies, and it's just filled with those instances of just hippies, like doing incredible service and surrendering, and in very, very difficult circumstances, like that, like in Bombay, and even just living in India alone at that time. But anyway, so it's all around. There's so many examples, right?
All around.
And plus remember that I sell books. If anybody would like to get one, just let me know. It's
Okay.
highly recommended. But my
Highly
question
recommended.
was that I'm reading the fourth canto about King Prithu's 100 horse sacrifices. And when at all of his sacrifices, the Lord came. Lord Vishnu was so pleased by him. And in that day and age, that was the Yuga Dharma, these sacrifices. And I was really surprised that whenever he appeared, all of the great personalities, the demigods came, and the residents of Gandharva Loka, Apsara Loka, and the Siddha Loka, Vijayadhara Loka, all the descendants of Diti, and the demons and yakshas. And I'm like, wow, what would the demons be doing accompanying the Lord? Like, I was surprised. I thought they didn't really mix with these devotees and elevated personalities. And so why were they there? And apparently, they didn't cause any trouble like Indra did, who is a devotee. But why would they be there too? There's no purport or anything to that verse. Any
I don't
insight?
know. I'd have to look and see if there was some comment.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
Yeah, I think in other places also it may.
But sometimes we Like we know that when Prithu Maharaj milks the earth, then the demigods get a share of the benefit, the demons get a share. Prahlad Maharaj milks a cow, and the result becomes intoxicants, if I remember, that the demons,
Alcohol.
yeah, alcohol, that the beer, which the demons go after. So in these sacrifices, all sorts of people would reap the results. I don't have a deeper thought than that or not. If anyone knows anything, has anything to contribute, feel free. There's a comment here from Prabeen. Let's see. Nahyam Mayani Tirtani Na Devas Chetanagra Te Punantu. Forgive my vision. Kalina Yuyam Darshana Matrataha. Mere bodies of water do not constitute holy places, nor are lifeless statues of the demigods actual worshipable deities, because external vision fails to appreciate the higher essence of the holy rivers and the demigods. These purify only after a considerable time, but devotees like you purify immediately just by being seen. I don't really have a comment about that. It's an interesting quotation. Yes, Govinda Nandani had a question.
Maharaj, over a period of time, I realized that the parallel journey of our existence, like the externals that we have to face and the internal cultivation of bhakti is something very important. So I wanted to request you to please comment and guide me on this particular topic, sharing your own practice and experience, how you have realized that our internal journey is something that has to go on irrespective of
Govinda Nandani is asking about our external and internal journeys. The external journey is going on, and then there's in parallel an internal journey. And your question was that
just comment based upon your experience.
comment based on my experience. That's going to be a pretty thin comment. But it's, well, we can say that it's not just what we do, but what we learn. Like we may be sitting in a classroom and someone else is sitting in the classroom. So the two of us are sitting and it's the same thing. But I'm sitting there and I'm listening and I'm learning something. And the person next to me is thinking, when are we going to get out of here so I can go out and play baseball? So externally, it's the same. We're doing the same thing. But internally, the experience, the journey is very different. One person is chanting Hare Krishna and he's thinking 12, 13, 14. And another person is thinking Hare Krishna, he's appreciating. So it's a different, externally, you see the same thing. Two devotees are chanting their rounds. But internally, one is chanting with some taste and the other is chanting in a more preliminary stage, just trying to complete his vow. So we all have, in that sense, different journeys. And it may be reflected externally. We see that the person who has deep internal realization may accomplish more in Krishna's service. He's entrusted with more. That may be. So it's not that the internal journey is entirely divorced from our external activities. Or sometimes we see that externally the devotee is given some special mercy from Krishna. He's either given a special facility or he's smashed or put through hardship or whatever it is. but it's Krishna's mercy. But then internally again, one devotee takes it as Krishna's mercy, and others says, well, if I'm going to be treated like this, I don't believe in God. So it's, yeah, so there's the internal and the external.
It's very useful to know that they could be interconnected.
Excuse me?
It's good to know that they could be interconnected, because I was
Yeah,
always
there's
thinking that, my internal could never be connected.
the internal and external are connected the way our external and internal, well, at least our internal and external bodies are connected, but they're not the same. My external body may be going through this or that, and my internal body, my mind and so on, may be peaceful, tranquil, unaffected, or not totally absorbed in material circumstance, depending. So from that point of view, both things are important, what we do and also what our consciousness is. What we do and what our consciousness is. Srila Prabhupada expressed that a devotional service is practical activity for the sake of the Lord. So that involves the external body, the external senses. We use them for Krishna. Then we want to use our internal senses also, mind, intelligence, direct them to Krishna. Thank you. Yeah, we have 4 minutes left. Are there any other comments or questions? Nice to see you, Jai Guru Sundar Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Any other things to talk about? Otherwise, we can have 4 minutes of kirtan. Is that Mridanga still around?
Right here.
Right there. Shall we chant Hare Krishna for 4 minutes? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramam Savarikar Charja Stod Shri Srimad AC Bhakti Vedanta Swami Raj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Nama Acharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kunigiri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.